It was already dark outside when he finally shut down his work laptop. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the ceiling fan. He had been staring at screens all day, dealing with deadlines, emails, and problems that never seemed to end. All he wanted now was a simple meal and a few hours of silence before another long day began. He heated leftover rice, ate straight from the container, and stood by the small kitchen window for a moment. The street below was calm. A few lights were still on in nearby houses, but most of the world seemed to be winding down. That was when the knock came. It wasn't loud. Just a slow, unsure tap against the door. He froze, spoon still in his hand. No one ever came by this late. Friends usually called before showing up, and delivery drivers knocked with more urgency. This knock felt different, almost careful. Like the person on the other side wasn't sure they should be there at all. For a long moment he didn't move. His first thought was irritation. His second was caution. He set the spoon down and walked quietly toward the door, peering through the small window. The porch light was dim, but he could make out the shape of someone standing there. He opened the door just a little. At first, a woman stood on the porch. Her shoulders slightly hunched, her hands tucked into the sleeves of a thin jacket. Her hair was unkempt, and her face looked tired in a way sleep alone couldn't fix. Her eyes lifted when she saw him, and for a second, neither of them spoke. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know it's late." I didn't know where else to go, tightened his grip on the door. "Do I know you?" She shook her head. "Not really. We talked once. Weeks ago, outside the grocery store." He paused, searching his memory. He spoke to dozens of people in small, passing ways. It took a moment. Then he remembered. She had been sitting near the entrance that day, asking people for change. He hadn't given money, but he had spoken to her. Asked if she was okay? Treated her like a person instead of something to avoid. She saw recognition flicker across his face and nodded. "You were kind to me," she said. "You didn't rush past. You didn't look away. You didn't answer right away." 1,000 thoughts ran through his mind. This was a mistake. His instincts warned him. This wasn't his problem. He barely knew her. People took advantage of kindness all the time. "I'm not asking for much," she added quickly, as if reading his thoughts. "Just a place to sit for a bit. I don't have anywhere tonight." The air between them felt heavy. He glanced behind him at his small living room. Clean, quiet, safe. Then he looked back at her. She wasn't trying to push past him. She wasn't making demands. She was simply standing there waiting. "How did you find me?" he asked. She hesitated. "I remembered the name on your jacket. Looked it up. I know that sounds strange, but I didn't have many options left." That gave him pause. It was honest, at least. Awkward and desperate, but honest. He sighed and opened the door a little wider. "You can sit for a few minutes," he said. That's all. Relief washed over her face so clearly it surprised him. She stepped inside slowly, like she expected him to change his mind at any second. "Thank you." Then immediately wondered if that had been the wrong thing to do. He gestured toward the couch. "You can sit there." She sat down carefully, keeping her hands folded in her lap. He noticed how tense she was, how her eyes flicked around the room, taking everything in. He went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, then hesitated before grabbing a mug and making some tea. "Do you want something warm?" he asked. She nodded. "If it's not too much trouble." When he handed her the mug, her hand shook slightly. She wrapped her fingers around it and closed her eyes for a second, breathing in the steam. They sat in silence for a while. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't easy either. Finally, he spoke. "What happened?" She looked down at the floor. "That's a long story. I've got time," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. She took a deep breath. "Things just kept going wrong. One thing after another. I thought I could fix it on my own." He didn't push. He let her speak at her own pace. "I had a place before," she continued. "A job too. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Then the hours got cut. Then the rent went up. I missed one payment. Then another." She laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. "It's strange how fast people stop answering your calls," he nodded. He had seen it before. Maybe not lived it, but close enough to understand. "I stayed with friends at first," she said. "Then couches ran out. People have their own problems." "I get that." She looked up at him. "I didn't want to knock on your door. I argued with myself all afternoon, but you were the last person who looked at me like I mattered." That sentence settled deep in his chest. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of this moment. Letting her inside had been an impulse. Sitting here now, listening to her, made it real. "You can stay tonight," he said, before he fully thought it through. Her eyes widened. "I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be," he said, surprising himself with how firm his voice sounded. "Just tonight. We'll figure out tomorrow. She nodded slowly, tears threatening but never falling. "I won't forget this," she said. He stood up and grabbed a blanket from the hallway closet, setting it on the couch. "Bathroom's down the hall. I'll be in the other room." She thanked him again, more quietly this time. As he lay in bed later, sleep didn't come easily. His mind replayed the knock, the look on her face, the way her voice trembled when she spoke. He wondered if he had been foolish. He wondered if he had done the right thing. In the next room, she lay awake too, staring at the ceiling, holding on to a fragile sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. Neither of them knew it yet. But that knock on the door had already changed something. Not loudly, not all at once. Just enough to matter. Morning came slowly. The light pushed its way through the thin curtains, landing across the living room floor. He woke up earlier than usual, not because of an alarm, but because he remembered all at once that someone else was in his house. For a moment he lay still, listening. The place was quiet. Too quiet, he sat up, ran a hand over his face, and wondered if last night had been a dream. Then he heard a soft movement from the living room. The quiet scrape of fabric against the couch. It was real. He got out of bed and stepped into the hallway. She was already awake, sitting on the edge of the couch, with the blanket folded neatly beside her. She looked almost embarrassed to be seen so early. It's like a guest who had overstayed without meaning to. "Good morning," he said. She stood up quickly. "I hope I didn't cause trouble." "You didn't," he said. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded. "Better than I have in a long time." He didn't know what to say to that, so he went into the kitchen instead. He opened the cabinet, realizing too late that he didn't have much beyond basic food: eggs, bread, a little milk. "I can make something simple," he called. "That's really not necessary," she replied. But he cracked the eggs anyway. The sound filled the quiet space, grounding him. She hovered near the doorway, unsure whether to offer help or stay out of the way. "You can sit," he said gently. She did. They ate in near silence, but it wasn't awkward anymore. The silence felt cautious, like both of them were testing the ground. After a while, she broke it. "I should go soon." He looked up. "Where?" She shrugged. "I'll figure something out." He didn't believe her. Neither did she. "Let's take today to think," he said. "No rush." She hesitated. Then she nodded. The room settled again. The morning stretched ahead of them, long and undefined. Later, while he checked emails on his laptop, she sat quietly with her phone, searching job listings, shelters, anything that felt like a path forward. He noticed how focused she was, how she didn't waste time scrolling or drifting. She treated every option seriously, even the ones that clearly led nowhere. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She looked up immediately, alert. "Of course. Why didn't you ask the others?" She knew what he meant. She sighed. "I did." At first, she explained how reaching out had slowly become harder, how missed calls turned into unread messages, how people stopped promising help and started offering advice instead. Advice was easier. Advice didn't require space or money. "I don't blame them," she said. "Everyone's struggling with something." Sentence stuck with him. Not bitter. Not angry. Just tired. Around midday, a knock came at the door. He stiffened. She noticed immediately. "I can go," she said quickly. No, he replied. It's fine. But his heart was already racing. He opened the door to find a neighbor standing there. Friendly face. Curious eyes. Hey, the neighbor said. Everything okay? Thought I heard someone last night. He forced a smile. Yeah, just had someone stay over. The neighbor nodded slowly, gaze drifting past him for just a second too long. All good then. Just checking. When the door closed, he exhaled. I didn't mean to cause problems, she said. You didn't, he repeated, though doubt now sat beside the reassurance. That afternoon, tension settled between them. Not conflict, but awareness. They both understood this situation couldn't last forever. He noticed small things. How she cleaned the kitchen without being asked. How she folded the blanket the same way every time. How she kept her belongings in one small bag, never spreading out. Why are you always so careful? He asked quietly. She paused, hands resting on the counter. Because when people help you, you don't get to be careless. That hit harder than he expected. As evening approached, he went for a short walk, needing air. When he returned, she was sitting on the couch again, staring at nothing. I got one interview, she said when he came in. For next week. His face lit up. That's great. It's not guaranteed, she said quickly. Nothing is, he replied, but it's something. Dinner was quieter. The weight of reality pressed in. This wasn't just a story about a kind night anymore. It was becoming complicated. Real life always was. Later, as the evening settled in, she spoke again. I'll leave tomorrow, she said. I don't want this to turn into something uncomfortable. He considered that. Considered the empty room, the extra blanket, the risk. You can stay a little longer, he said finally. If you want. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Thank you for saying that, she replied. That night, sleep came easier for both of them. Not because things were solved, but because they were being faced in the quiet dark. Each of them lay awake thinking about the same thing from different sides, how one moment of kindness had become a shared responsibility, and how walking away now would be harder than opening the door ever was. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm. They didn't feel like guests or hosts anymore. They felt like two people sharing the same space, careful not to step on each other's worries. Mornings were quiet. He went through his routine, coffee, emails, a short walk. She spent her time searching, making calls, writing notes in a small notebook she kept close. Sometimes she disappeared into silence for hours, lost in her thoughts. Other times, she spoke like someone afraid that if she stopped, hope might slip away. One afternoon, while he sat at the table working, she cleared her throat softly. Can I ask you something? Of course, he said, not looking up at first. Why did you really let me stay? He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. He hadn't thought much about his answer before now. I don't know, he said honestly. I guess I didn't want to be another closed door. She nodded, carefully taking that in. Closed doors add up, she said. After a while, you stop knocking. That afternoon, her phone rang. She stepped into the hallway to answer it, her back straight, her voice polite but tense. When she returned, her face told him everything. No, he asked. She shook her head. They filled the position already. She sat down slowly, staring at her hands. He could see the disappointment, but also something she was clearly trying to hide. Fear. He waited. He had learned by now that pushing rarely helped. That evening, something unexpected happened. There was another knock at the door. Both of them froze. I'll go, she said quickly, grabbing her bag. No, he said, standing up. Let me handle it. He opened the door to find a man holding a clipboard. Routine inspection notice. Nothing serious. But the relief didn't come easily. When the door closed, she laughed softly, a nervous release. I keep feeling like I shouldn't be seen. He frowned. You shouldn't have to feel that way. But I do, she replied. Later that night, she surprised him by cooking dinner. Simple food, carefully prepared. I don't have much to offer, she said as she set the plate down, but I don't want to just take. He tasted the food and smiled. It's good, She smiled too, and for a moment the weight lifted. But reality returned the next morning. He received a message from a family member. Casual at first, then pointed. A question about whether someone was staying with him. A warning slipped between the lines. He stared at the message longer than he should have. That evening, he brought it up. People are starting to notice, he said gently. She nodded. I figured they would. I don't want you to feel rushed, he added, but I need to be honest too. She didn't argue. You've already done more than enough. Her calm response made the situation heavier somehow. The next day, she came back from an interview looking exhausted. They asked about my address, she said quietly, and when I hesitated, I could tell. He clenched his jaw. That shouldn't matter. But it does, she replied. People say they want honesty until it makes them uncomfortable. That night, she couldn't sleep. He heard her pacing the living room back and forth, careful not to make noise. Hey, he said softly from the hallway. You okay? She shook her head. I'm tired of feeling like a problem. You're not, he said. She looked at him with tired eyes. That's easy to say when it's not your life falling apart. The words stung, but he knew they weren't meant to hurt. I know, he replied quietly, and I'm still here. The following days forced decisions. A local program finally called her back. Temporary work. Short hours. No promises. It's not much, she said. It's something, he replied again, meaning it more each time. She started leaving the house early, returning late. Each evening, she seemed a little stronger, a little more worn, but with progress came pressure. One night, she handed him a folded piece of paper. I found a room. Cheap. Not great, but it's mine. He unfolded it slowly. You want to move? He asked. I need to, she said. I can't let your kindness turn into obligation. Silence stretched between them. I'll help, he said finally. Her shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. Packing was quick. She didn't have much. On the last night, they sat on opposite ends of the couch. It's the same couch that had first held a sense of safety. I don't know where I'd be without you, she said. He swallowed. You'd have found a way. Maybe, she said, but it would have cost more. When morning came, they stood at the door together. No speeches. No promises. Just gratitude, mixed with uncertainty. As she stepped outside, he realized something important. Helping her hadn't been easy. It hadn't been clean or simple, but it had been real. And once you open your door the first time, the world never looks quite the same again. The house felt different after she moved her things. Not empty exactly, but quieter in a way that made him notice every small sound. The couch looked the same, yet it no longer carried the same weight. He told himself this was how it was supposed to be. She had found a place. She had work. This was progress. Still, the silence stayed. She moved into the rented room on a cloudy afternoon. He helped carry her bag, the small box of clothes, the notebook she never put down. The place wasn't great. The walls were thin. The hallway smelled old. But it had a lock, a window, and a bit of light. It's enough for now, she said, trying to sound convinced. He nodded. It's a start. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, unsure how to say goodbye. Finally, she reached out and shook his hand, then laughed softly at how formal it felt. Thank you, she said, for all of it. Take care of yourself, he replied, on the way home. He wondered if this was the end of their story. It wasn't. A week later, she called him for the first time. I'm sorry to bother you, she said quickly. I just needed someone to talk to. You're not a bother, he replied. What's going on? Work was harder than she expected. Long hours, little pay, constant pressure to prove herself. The room she rented was temporary too. The owner might need it back. I feel like I'm always one step from falling again, she admitted. He listened. That was what he had learned mattered most. A few days later, something else happened. He received a call from his workplace. A situation had come up. A short-term contract, not glamorous, but stable. One catch. They needed someone reliable immediately. As he listened, a thought formed in his mind. He hesitated. That evening, he called her. There's an opening, he said. Where I work. Temporary, but it could turn into more. There was a long pause. Why would you do that for me? She asked quietly. Because you earned it, he replied. And because someone once gave me a chance when I needed it. The interview went better than either of them expected. The manager asked questions. She answered honestly. When they asked for references, there was a moment of hesitation. She stayed with me, he said calmly. During a rough time, she was respectful and responsible. He felt every eye in the room shift toward him. On the way home, doubt crept in. Had he crossed a line? Had he risked too much? 2 days later, the call came. She got the job. Her voice shook when she told him. I don't know how to thank you. Just show up, he said. That's enough, she did. Early mornings, late evenings, quiet determination. Each week, she grew more confident, more grounded. She paid small bills on time, bought groceries with her own money, began saving a little, but change always comes with tests. One afternoon at work, someone pulled him aside. I heard you helped her out, they said. Not accusing. Just curious. He nodded. She needed help.
Oh.
The person studied him for a moment. Careful. Not everyone appreciates risks like that. He thought about that on the walk home. That evening, she brought groceries and cooked dinner at his place like she used to. Laughing softly over burned bread and too much salt. I might be able to move closer to work, she said. A smaller place. But better. That's great, he said, meaning it. Later, sitting alone, he realized something else. Helping her had changed him too. He noticed people more now, listened longer, judged less quickly. One night, she came over unexpectedly. They offered me a longer contract, she said, eyes bright. If things keep going well, they stood there smiling at each other. Simple shared victory. I couldn't have done this without you, she said. He shook his head. You did the work. I just opened a door. But both of them knew the truth fell somewhere in between. As she left that night, he watched from the doorway. He felt proud, not in a loud way, but quietly. Deeply, kindness hadn't solved everything, but it had shifted the direction, and sometimes that was enough to change a life. Time has a quiet way of settling things. Weeks passed, then months. Not the kind of months filled with big moments or dramatic changes, but steady ones. The kind where life slowly begins to feel normal again. She went to work every day, rain or shine. Sometimes tired, sometimes unsure, but always moving forward. Her longer contract became official. It wasn't a celebration kind of moment. No cheers. Just her standing in the hallway at work, holding the paper, breathing deep like someone afraid to hope too loudly. I wanted you to be the first to know, she told him later that evening. I'm glad, he replied. And he meant it. She moved into a small place closer to work. One room, clean and simple, nothing fancy. When she unlocked the door for the first time, she stood there quietly for a long moment. Then she stepped inside and sat on the floor, letting the silence wrap around her. This silence felt different. It didn't scare her. He helped her bring in secondhand furniture, one piece at a time. They laughed when the small table almost didn't fit through the doorway. She apologized too many times, and he reminded her she didn't need to. You're not asking for rescue, he said. You're building something. That mattered to her more than he knew. They didn't see each other every day anymore. Life moved on. But sometimes they shared dinner. Sometimes just a walk. Sometimes nothing at all. And that was okay one evening. She asked him a question she'd been holding inside. Do you ever regret opening the door that night? He thought about it. No, he said slowly. I was scared. I worried. But I don't regret it. She nodded. I was scared too. I almost walked away instead of knocking. They sat with that truth for a while. At work, people eventually stopped whispering. She became known for being reliable, quiet, focused, someone others could depend on. Not because of sympathy, but because she earned it. One afternoon, a new coworker sat beside her during lunch. I heard you had it rough before, the coworker said carefully. How did you get back on your feet? She thought for a moment, then answered simply, someone was kind, and I didn't waste it. She never shared details. She didn't need to. Meanwhile, his life had shifted too. He found himself doing small things differently, holding doors longer, listening more, letting people finish their stories. He noticed pain more easily now, but also strength. One night, months later, there was another knock on his door. His heart skipped for a moment before he laughed at himself. When he opened it, she stood there, holding a small bag. I made too much food, she said. Thought you might want some. Stepped aside, smiling. Come in. They ate at the table, talking about ordinary things, whether work, plans that finally felt possible before she left. She turned to him. You didn't save me, she said softly. You just reminded me I was worth helping. He swallowed. You did the rest. When the door closed behind her, he stood there for a moment longer. He knew now that kindness didn't need to be loud or heroic. It didn't need recognition. Sometimes it only needed a door opened at the right time. Somewhere in the city, she locked the door to her own place and set her bag down. She looked around and smiled. The night she knocked had felt like an ending. It turned out to be a beginning. Not just for her, but for both of them. Life didn't pause after things settled. It kept moving, quiet and steady, the way it always does when no one is watching. Months passed since she moved into her own place. The early excitement faded, replaced by routine. Work, bills, small joys, small worries. She learned the rhythm of her days. Wake up before the sun. Catch the bus. Do her job well, even when she felt tired. Come home, cook something simple, and rest. Some evenings were harder than others. There were nights when the old fear crept back, when the silence in her room felt too loud, when one small problem made everything else feel fragile. Those were the moments she reminded herself how far she had come. She wasn't surviving day to day anymore. She was standing on her own. He stayed in her life, but from a healthy distance. A message now and then, a short call, an occasional meal. Nothing forced. Nothing owed. That balance mattered. One afternoon, she received an email at work asking if she could train a new hire. She reread it twice, unsure if it was meant for her. No one had asked that of her before. Me, she asked her supervisor, almost embarrassed. You're reliable, the supervisor replied. People respond to you. She nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Later that evening, she told him about it. They trust you, he said. I'm still getting used to that, she admitted. The next week brought a challenge she didn't expect. The building she lived in changed ownership. Rent might increase. Nothing was confirmed yet, but the uncertainty hit hard. Old memories surfaced. The feeling of being one step away from losing everything. She didn't panic this time. She made a list, budgeted carefully, looked at options, asked questions. She even reached out to a housing support office for advice. When she told him, he noticed the difference. You're handling this differently, he said. I know, she replied. I used to freeze. Now I plan. That night, he thought about how much she had changed. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because she believed she deserved stability. Then something unexpected happened. A coworker she barely knew asked for help. I heard you're good with this stuff, the coworker said quietly. I'm about to lose my place. I don't know what to do. She felt the weight of that moment immediately. She listened. She shared resources, ideas, and most of all, patience. She didn't promise miracles. She didn't pretend to have all the answers. I can't fix it, she said gently, but you don't have to face it alone. Later, when she told him about the conversation, her voice shook slightly. That's how it starts, he said. You pass it on. She sat with that for a long time. Weeks later, the rent increase turned out to be small, manageable. She breathed easier. Her contract at work was extended again, this time with benefits. She didn't celebrate loudly. She simply went home, made dinner, and slept deeply for the first time in a while. One evening, as she walked home, she passed the grocery store where she had once sat outside weeks before she knocked on his door. She slowed her steps and looked at the entrance. People walked in and out, busy. Distracted, she didn't feel shame anymore. She felt gratitude. That weekend, she visited him with a small plant in her hands. "For your place," she said. "To remind you of what?" he asked. "That small things grow," she replied. They placed it by the window. As time went on, neither of them talked much about that night anymore. They didn't need to. It lived quietly between them, not as a burden, but as proof that lives don't always change in loud moments. Sometimes they change because someone chose not to look away. And sometimes the greatest sign of healing is when you become strong enough to help someone else stand. Some changes arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, till one day you realize life no longer feels the same. A year had passed since the night she knocked on his door. Neither of them marked the date. There were no reminders, no messages sent. But the memory still lived in them, steady and clear. Like a line that divided life into before and after, she was no longer just stable. She was trusted. At work, people came to her with questions. Not just about tasks, but about problems, schedules, conflicts, worries they didn't want to take home. She listened the way she once needed someone to listen to her. Patient, focused, without judgment. One afternoon, her supervisor pulled her aside. "There's a position opening," she was told. "More responsibility, longer hours. But it's growth." She didn't answer right away. That night, she sat at her small table, the notebook open in front of her. She wrote out the reasons to say yes, then the reasons to say no. Fear sat quietly on both sides of the page. She called him. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "You didn't know you were ready last time either," he reminded her gently. She smiled to herself. "You're right," she said yes. The new role pushed her harder than she expected. Mistakes happened. Long days blurred together. Some nights, she came home exhausted, questioning everything, but she kept going. She learned how to speak up without apologizing, how to ask questions without feeling small, how to accept correction without taking it as proof that she didn't belong. Slowly, confidence replaced doubt. Meanwhile, his life shifted in quieter ways. He didn't change jobs or cities. He didn't make dramatic choices. But he noticed how people responded to him now. How often strangers trusted him with small truths. How often he chose patience where he once chose distance. One evening, while standing in line at a cafe, he noticed a woman near the door, hesitating, unsure whether to enter. The moment looked familiar. He stepped aside and held the door open. "After you," he said. The smile she gave him stayed with him all day. A few months later, she called him late in the evening. "Can I ask you something personal?" She said, "Sure. What would you have done if I'd never knocked?" He thought for a long moment. "I would have gone to sleep," he said honestly, "and I would have never known what I missed." Her voice softened. "I think about that too." That winter, something unexpected happened. Her rented building announced major repairs. Everyone had to move out within a few months. Panic rippled through the tenants. She felt the fear again, sharp and sudden, but this time, she didn't face it alone or unprepared. She contacted housing offices, negotiated timelines, looked at options early. She toured places without embarrassment this time, asked direct questions, set clear limits. When she finally signed a lease on a better apartment, she stood in the empty room and laughed quietly. "I did this," she whispered. On moving day, he showed up without asking, to carry boxes, he said as they worked. She looked around at the life she had built, simple but strong. "I want you to know something," she said as they took a break. "Even if you hadn't helped me beyond that first night, it still would have mattered. Sometimes one night is enough." That evening, they sat on the floor eating takeout. The sun dipped low, filling the room with warm light. "I'm thinking of volunteering," she said suddenly. "Where?" "Job placement center." "Just a few hours a month?" smiled. Sounds like you. She didn't see herself as extraordinary. She didn't see herself as a story anyone needed to tell. She just knew what it felt like to stand outside, unsure if anyone would open the door. And now, when she saw that look on someone else's face, she understood what to do. Kindness had once changed her direction. Now, it had become part of who she was. Some endings don't arrive as endings. They arrive as moments that quietly close a circle. It was late evening when she finished her volunteer shift for the first time. The office was small, the lights low, the air warm with voices that carried both worry and hope. She had spent hours listening, helping people fill out forms, telling them where to go next. Most of all, reminding them that their situation did not define their worth. As she walked out into the cool night air, she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and peace. She remembered another night, another sidewalk, another feeling of being invisible. This time she wasn't. A few weeks later, she helped someone get their first interview in months. It wasn't guaranteed work, just an opening. But she saw the same look in their eyes that she once carried. A careful hope, afraid to breathe too deeply. You did good, her supervisor at the center told her. She smiled softly. She didn't need praise. She only needed to know she was useful in the right way. Meanwhile, his life continued in its steady rhythm. Work, home, small habits that filled the days. But something had changed permanently. He noticed moments where the old version of himself might have walked past, stayed quiet, avoided involvement. Now he paused. One evening, he found himself helping a neighbor move a heavy box. Another time, he stayed late to listen when a coworker talked about something hard. These weren't big choices, just small ones. But they added up. They still met now and then. One night, they shared coffee at a small place near her new apartment. Rain tapped lightly against the window. The kind of night that made people slow down. You ever think about how close it all came to going a different way? She asked. All the time, he replied. That's what makes it matter. She nodded. I used to think help had to come in big forms. Money, promises, solutions, and now I know sometimes it's just being seen. Months passed smoothly after that. She became permanent in her role. Not because of luck, but consistency. The kind no one sees building day by day. She saved enough to replace old furniture. She framed a simple picture for her wall. Nothing expensive. Just something that made the place feel finished. One afternoon, she stood in her living room and realized she no longer felt like she was borrowing a life. It was hers. On the anniversary of her move, she invited him for dinner. She cooked carefully, laughing at herself when the timing went off. I learned most things the hard way, she said. So did I, he replied, after dinner. They stood on the balcony watching the city lights. You opened your door without knowing who I was, she said quietly. That still amazes me, shook his head. You knocked when you could have given up. That's what amazes me. They didn't make the moment bigger than it needed to be, somewhere else in the city. Another person stood outside another door, unsure whether to knock. Another story waited to begin. She understood that now. Life hadn't become perfect. There were still worries, still unexpected challenges, but she wasn't afraid of them anymore, and he wasn't afraid of opening his door to the world. Because one night, long ago, two strangers crossed paths at exactly the right moment, and neither of them walked away.